Welcome to our series on developing new CTE courses and pathways. In this segment, we will dig into state requirements, specifically around course sequencing and how to code those courses in CalPads. I'm Jewel Alderson, a coordinator at the San Diego County Office of Education, supporting career readiness. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions along the way. State requirements are just one of many different components of developing new CTE pathways. So you might be diving in deeply right now just to get a little bit more insight on those coding and industry sectors and standards. But the reality is all of these different components are a piece of that high quality pathway that you're developing. So come on back and check out our other series videos as needed. But today, sticking to those state requirements. So hopefully you've seen this before. This is the list of industry sectors that are currently approved at the state, along with the specific pathways in those sectors. And so as we look later this year, we may see some updates here in the arts, media, and entertainment sector in these standards. And over the next 5 or 6 years, we should see a revision of many of these standards as they align more to industry. But as you dig in, what you'll see is for each sector, for instance, engineering and architecture is a sector of industry. What we see is 4 different pathways here that tie into CTE programs that could be at your school. So every single thing that you want to do in that pathway should live in one single bullet on this bigger document. And there are standards for each one of these that we'll dive into in today's presentation. So first of all, those sectors each have their own suite of standards. So as you saw, the pathways poster there and the model curriculum standards. And we'll dive into that a little bit here. But what we also want you to understand is what is a pathway completer? So to be considered a pathway completer, that student must complete 300 hours between a concentrator and a capstone course. So these are specifically designated courses, and together that pathway should hit all of the different components of the standards set out for that pathway. We will also dive into those CTE course codes and how you can code with CalPads. You want those CTE courses to be taught by a CTE credentialed teacher in the sector they are teaching within. And so you can also dig into our presentation that touches on credentialing for that. Now, historically, a traditional CTE pathway would be a 3-year pathway. That would include an introductory course, so introduction, semester 1 and 2, concentrator, semester 1 and semester 2, capstone, semester 1 and semester 2. So that's 3 full years. This introductory course can be at the middle school level, but based on current state kind of the CCI and the different dashboard requirements, you actually don't need an intro course to be listed at your high school. So there are some ways that you can do this a little bit differently if you want to increase the number of completers that you get, even if you want a 3-year pathway. Because right now, the minimum standard of CTE completer for the state of California is that they have 300 hours, and that is 2 semesters of concentrator followed by 2 semesters of capstone with a C- or better. These courses need to be all in the same pathway. For instance, architectural design in the same industry, engineering and architecture. So unfortunately, like if you look here, right, there's a lot of engineering technology, engineering design, environmental engineering. Well, if you want to have a concentrator class focused on engineering design, and then a capstone class focused on environmental engineering, because you're doing a mix and match of pathways, the students who finish that pathway will not be considered a completer as far as the state is concerned. And so you want to be really careful about how you're coding your classes, and you can play around with the language we use for our courses, but when it comes to how we code them, you want to make sure they're sequenced properly and that they're addressing the specific CalPads requirements to ensure that your students are a completer. Now, completer status means that it's just one of those many brownie points that helps your school on the college and career indicator of the California School Dashboard, right? So if you have a pathway completer, it's kind of they need to have 2 different components. So they might be A through G and pathway completers. They might have college course and be a pathway completer. They might do well on the SBAC and be a pathway completer. So when you have these multiple metrics where students are standouts, then they might be considered a prepared student. And that's really helpful when you're looking at where you stand on the CCI, or the College of Career Indicator for the California School Dashboard. So let's say you have room for 3 courses. Well, first of all, you can always drop that intro course down to the middle school. At the middle school, you can run introductory courses to whatever you want. You can run also a wheel course where you can kind of dip into all the different programs that you have at the high school, so students get a more well-rounded experience and then can make informed decisions about what high school pathways they enter. But once they get to high school, what I recommend is that you do concentrator and capstone. And if you want a 3-year pathway, throw a 3rd course that's dual enrollment on the top of this, or maybe an internship course. Or if you really want 3 courses in the same pathway, you could have another capstone course that they could then go on towards. But then at least after the first 2 years of the pathway, all those students are considered completers. And then that kind of gets you to where you need to be for your data. It reduces the barriers to students becoming completers, because 3 full years can be very difficult. And it reduces the fact that a lot of our students who may need a variety of other courses would not have access to it if it's 3 years long. So creating 2-year long courses is a great way, or pathways is a great way to increase your number of completers. CalPADS code should also align with that pathway, and they should match the course that's being taught as well as the credential. All right, so we need these 3 things to match. We need our CalPADS code to match the standards, and the credential to match all of those right there. When we get into the model curriculum standards, what you'll see, so like if we come back here and we'll keep that architectural design as our focus point here. What you're going to do is you click here and go to the California Department of Ed website, and we have model curriculum standards, which means that for each industry sector, we have a whole suite of standards. In this case, we're talking engineering and architecture, so let's dig into here. You should, at the top, see that really familiar bubble that tells us, oh yeah, we're in engineering and architecture. We'll let this take a second to load. And then it will outline all the different standards. So we see the engineering and architecture, and here are the 4 bullet points that we saw if we kind of come back here and we look at our engineering and architecture bubble on that original document. So what we're going to see here is we're going to look through this document, and each document for each sector looks very similar. So it's a sector-wide document, and in it, it's going to outline separate sets of standards for each pathway, as well as what we call the anchor standards that anchor all of these pathways into the same sector. All right, so when we come down and look at this document in the table of contents, what you'll see is first you're going to have your overview of the sector. You're going to have what's called the standards for career ready practice, and these are the same for all of our industries. And in the standards for career ready practice, it also outlines that this should be used for all students, no matter what course they're in, CTE or otherwise. And this is a really great framing as you're looking at things like graduate profiles and other school-wide or district-wide objectives for our students. Those standards for career ready practice are amazing, and they also align really well to CASEL's framework when you start looking at helping our students find their belonging and having an SEL initiative, social emotional learning, right? You get into the description. Now you're going to get into what we call the anchor standards. The anchor standards are actually overlapping and aligned to the career ready practice, but they are specific to this sector. So you're going to teach, if you're teaching architectural design pathway, you will teach all of the anchor standards and the set of A standards in this document. You don't ever have to teach the B, C, or D standards in that pathway. And your A standards should be divided up amongst your courses equally, more or less. There's also some matrices at the end about how it aligns with academics, particularly Common Core State standards. All right. So if we kind of come back through here, here's our overview of our sector, and we can dive in. This is our standards for career ready practice. And when we get into the anchor standards, that really takes the standards for career ready practice and puts them into a specific context for this industry sector. So here, if I kind of zoom in again, you can see this is, first of all, academics refer to the alignment matrix and how those come together. But here it's like your communications. How are you really focused on engineering and architecture terminology and protocols? And so it'll dive into these more deeply. So as you plan your architecture pathway, you will want to hit all of these anchor standards, as we call them. And you can see that these kind of anchor across really more of a broad set of content as they apply to this. And then at the end of these, you'll start seeing the lettered standards. And again, because this is the architectural design pathway, it is the A set. So if I'm looking at the A set, then I'm just going to teach across my entire pathway, which could be 2 or 3 or sometimes even 4 years. These are the standards I'm going to divide up and teach. I will often reteach the same standard in a more advanced class at a more advanced level in order to ensure I'm meeting everything. Now we've made it to the B standards, and I don't need to teach these if I'm doing an architectural pathway because I only need to hit the architectural standards. All right, so as we're going through, so that's how you use those curriculum standards. You find your sector, find the pathway standards for your sector. You need to cover the standards for career ready practice, which are aligned to the anchor standards, and then just the letter that is associated with your pathway that you are developing. And so those should be covered in your course, like I say here, and could be at a different level of rigor. Now, the place where we get kind of into difficulty land is coding. And the really important thing to know is that you should be involved in coding this course. So a lot of folks have somebody who is maybe your registrar or works with your student information systems, whose job it is to prepare like the CalPADS document, which is the specific set of data that we're rolling up to the state. And that particular data set, the CalPADS data set, is what includes all of our CTE data around our CTE course completers and all of our CTE courses. So if you just say, code the CTE things and send them to the state, your SIS or whoever your CalPADS person is going to look at the course and they're going to look through these course codes and they're going to decide what it should be called. The problem is you are the one who knows how it's supposed to be sequenced and how it should be called. So what you want to do is make sure that you're helping to work with whoever is creating your CalPADS reports so that they know how each of your courses should be coded. So this is the most recent user guide. Often these are around for a number of years before they're revised. So don't stress if it is like 2024 right now and you can only find this one. But, keep an eye out there on the Department of Ed website because they do update them on occasion. What you'll find here is a lot of different sectors. So I know that we are talking about engineering, but architectural design, right? So I can click on this and it's nicely made so that it'll jump straight to that part of the document. And so what I see here is if I go in, here's my engineering and architecture sector. I have a few pathway options. First of all, I could have an introductory pathway, but remember, an intro class doesn't really count for the CCI. Great fit for middle schools. It's fine if you have a academy or a multi-year model where all of your kids are going to take 3 or 4 CTE courses. But for the most part, you probably just want to start here. And you should be calling them 7710 and 7711. And when you code it in CalPADS, you'll call it Intermediate Architectural Design and Advanced Architectural Design. These are your concentrator and your capstone. You do not have to use those labels for the course itself and the transcript, though. This is just how you're coding it. So while you can use these, often what I like to do, just to make it really clear to our students and counselors, is I might call this Architectural Design 1 and Architectural Design 2, because they're the first and second courses in the sequence. If your organization likes to have each semester be a little different of a name, then it might be Architectural Design 1A and Architectural Design 1B. architectural design 2A and 2B, and that might be one way to code them. And then find your way into consistency. You may have your own coding system, but when it comes to CalPads, you want 7710 and 7711 to be the sequence of courses that students are taking in order to be completers for the architectural design pathway. Right? So while the language you use for students and community might look a little different, you could just say, you could call these, architecture, you could call it creating the world around us, like whatever you want. Like nobody actually cares how you label them, except when it gets into that CalPads and then it says, all right, this I'm pulling out my SIS and I'm going to label it 7710. It's my intermediate architectural design. You might say, wait, my kids aren't ready for intermediate. They didn't have intro. That doesn't matter. So basically, if you're building a pathway that does not include an introductory course, that means your intermediate course also includes introductory materials and is able to introduce students to the coursework without an intro course. So there's no prerequisite for this intermediate course. All right. So that document is really helpful in finding your concentrated capstone. And also, if you're building a course from scratch, you may even use some of this language as part of your course description for your students and for your course description as you write that up if you're going to submit this to the UC A through G system. You also want to make sure that you're fulfilling any NCAA requirements. When you are submitting a new course for UC A through G, sometimes we don't realize that there are multiple places where those requirements need to be met. Now, we talked about the standards and we talked about the codes, but also remember that you need a credential that matches the code. And so like right here, we dove into this. So here's screenshots of what we just did, where you see you want that architectural design, here are the pathways, and then here is the actual coding you want to use. There are some, and when it comes to those, I'll show you in a moment some reference items that are helpful. Another reference is this model courses. So California Educators Together is a statewide repository, and it actually grew from something called CTE Online. So if you're familiar with CTE Online, this is a open educational resource. So all resources in here are open for anyone. If you go in and search just the right way, you can actually get to a point where you see this little red word outline. And to find this, you go into resources, you click resource categories, and you click curriculum outlines. As part of CTE Online, back when this was a full CTE focus area, they actually developed a number of full course outlines that you can use in your concentrator or capstone course. Let's say you want to make a new biotech course. Biotech is huge in San Diego County. You can actually go through and this person, Bunny Cervantes, has created this back in 2020. So it's not that long ago. You could reach out to her and ask questions of it, but she's developed out all the units. She's aligned all the standards. She has, if you click on these are different assignments that you can use. So I want you to feel really confident in building pathways because you don't have to build them from scratch. Unlike, when I taught science, I could buy a science textbook and that came with curriculum and I was going to reteach that and that's all I was going to teach. CTE is not really like that. There are some packages of curriculum that you might buy, but generally the teacher is really not only teaching the course, but pulling in curriculum. And part of the reason is that we need our CTE courses to always be up to date with industry. And so if we were to adopt a curriculum, it would be out of date, within a year or two, and it would be more difficult for our instructors to keep up. At the same time, then you need to support your teachers with all the pedagogy and the curriculum as possible. And so building from things like CTE Online, which is now California Educators Together, is really helpful because now you could just adopt this very course and they could use this. You could use this to submit. At the top, it usually even tells you if it has been submitted for A through G. And so you can actually grab this. Now, it looks like a weird format. So the beauty is that you can usually download the outline and you can choose PDF, Word, or HTML. So you can download this in Word, and then you can go through and edit it in such a way that will work for your organization. And so these are really great starting points for people if you're not sure what to do. The UCCI catalog, this is an amazing program which has been sunset. So they're not building new courses as far as I know at this point, but they spent, I want to say, like 5 or more years working with organizations to build out courses that tied CTE and A through G courses together. So what you could see is, let's say we wanted to go into that, into an industry sector, like let's look at engineering and architecture. Here, there is an applied math for engineering, algebra 2 and trigonometry for engineers. And you could have this is approved in the A through G platform as a math class, and it connects to engineering design, right? So you could go through and pick Engineering America, US History and Engineering. So here you can either just steal great ideas for your architectural design course, or if you want to get into like a transformational system, then you might have a history or social science teacher who's going to teach this curriculum, and your architectural design teacher who's going to teach the CTE stuff. So if I click on this, the beauty is that the whole course is already here with descriptions and key assignments. And so you can just kind of adopt any components of this that you would like specifically in the work that you're doing, or you can work with them in order to adopt this as a course code that you're offering at your school. So these are really helpful resources. You should know that you're not building from scratch. There's a lot of things out here that can help you as you develop your pathways. Now, there's not a model course outline for every pathway. So this is another place where as you dive in, and you'll see I have this little kind of guide that you should be walking through as you do this. As you go through, what I encourage you to do is go through those sectors and pathways. What are you most interested in? Why? Feel free to add more. You're going to make a copy of this doc, right? What do you want your pathway to look like? You can click, oh, to your pathway. That seems like the best first step, even if you might want to expand. Here you can note anything from UCCI or CTE Online that's of interest and drop it in here. And then eventually, once you're ready to design your pathway, I've put together kind of this design template. And this is where you can make a copy of this for each pathway that you want. And here's where, okay, for my concentrator, here's the CalPADS code. Here's the credential needed for each one. And the beauty is the CTC actually has a place that lists the appropriate credential for each one of these. And so if I go in here and let's say I wanted to look at that, I think I'm going to go back to my course codes here, clicking at the tabs at the top. We know 7710 was that architectural design pathway. So let's say I was like, well, what instructor do I need? I can add my course code in here, not our course title. I know that's my intermediate architectural design. And then this tells me exactly what credential I need in order for me to run this course and not get pinged by the CTC. Now, if you pick this single subject course, that's great, but you may have a harder time using certain CTE funds. Like you cannot use any Perkins funds unless they have that CTE credential. The CTE incentive grant and K-12 SWP have language that says you need an instructor who is highly skilled in that field. And so although the previous guidance was they needed to have a CTE credential, they're getting a much more flexible with credential as long as it fits the course that you want. So the single subject industrial and technology education could work. However, this is something that sometimes there are some authorizations that are no longer being offered. And so it would be people who are grandfathered in. So keep an eye out for that when those credentials come up. Some of the credentials in the list may not be currently on offer to gain, but they may be grandfathered in on some of your teachers who've been around for a while. All right, now this whole section has been very technical, and I also have a number of quick reference CTE resources for CalPads. I presented on CalPads and CTE for some of our folks. So there's a presentation about that, and I have a bunch of different resources that you'll find in here, that path course codes by definitions by sector, but this is just reference for your assistance there. So thank you so much for joining me today as you are developing new CTE courses and pathways. If you are in San Diego County, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask any questions. In your own region, if you are from out of our county, you should have someone kind of like me at your county office of ed. And if you don't know who they are, I may be able to put you in touch. So just shoot me an email. Hope you're having a great day. Thank you, and good luck as you develop your pathways.